Camp 4. Zopa roused Holly and me out of our tents at sunrise. Another beautiful day, clear, crisp, 22 degrees, and rising, which meant we'd have to pack our cold weather gear on our backs instead of wearing it. To make things worse, Zopa gave us each a pile of Sunjo's gear to haul up to the first camp. Holly's share was a lot smaller than my share. She finished repacking quickly and left for the mess tent. It took me 45 minutes to recognize what I had packed the night before. I was slowed down by my ill feelings towards Sunjo and Zopa. I couldn't believe it. Not only had Zopa taken my gear and given it to Sunjo, but now I had to haul it up the mountain for him? It seemed that he was doing everything in his power to make sure I was too weak to get to the top. When I finally finished, my pack was 15 pounds heavier than it was for my first time up to ABC. Not good. 1 pound can make a huge difference at this altitude. I was trying to decide what to leave behind when Captain Sheck walked up. "You try for summit?" he demanded. He was out of uniform, dressed like a climber, which is probably why I didn't notice him sneaking up on me. "Not today," I said. "How old you?" He must have been watching and had waited to catch me alone like this. "How old you?" he repeated aggressively. Trick question. He'd seen my passport. He knew exactly how old I was. He wanted me to lie. I told him the truth. "Well, other boy?" Uh-oh. "Who?" I'm a terrible liar. "Boy, you climbed mountain with last week. Boy, you walk with in camp. You and he good friends." Captain Sheck's English was a little rough, but the sarcasm was crystal clear. He had watched us walking around camp. He had seen us head up the mountain to ABC. "Oh, him," I said stupidly. "I haven't seen him in a couple days. Where'd he go?" I shrugged. "You lying to me!" Apparently, I couldn't even shrug a lie. "I kick you off mountain if you lie." "Go ahead," I said, zipping my backpack closed. Probably not the brightest thing to say, but I had heard enough of Captain Sheck and everything else on Everest. He looked like he was about to explode. I don't think he was used to having a 14-year-old call his bluff. He raised his arm for a second. I thought he was going to hit me, but then he smiled, as if he realized this is the People's Republic of China. You have no rights thing wasn't going to work with me. "What is the other boy's name?" he asked in a much more reasonable tone. He didn't say. I picked up my pack. "I watching you." I walked away, feeling his eyes drilling into the back of my neck, proud of myself for not even thinking about ratting out Sunjo. As soon as I found Zopa, I told him about the conversation. He was a lot calmer about it than I was, saying that Captain Sheck was the least of our problems. "In a few days you will be at Camp 4, he said. "This is all you need to worry about." It turned out that he was right. We joined a small group of porters and their yaks heading up to the mountain. Sunjo was not with them. When I asked Zopa about this, he said, "He would be alone." The trip up to intermediate camp was a lot easier than the first time. I wasn't able to sing and chant with the porters, but I was able to talk as I walked, which was a big improvement. I even managed to use the tiny video camera and discovered that I was a lot more comfortable behind it than I was in front of it. The landscape had changed dramatically from the previous week. The warm weather had created several new streams of glacial runoff. It was difficult to find the places to cross without drenching ourselves. The other problem was the rocks. The thaw was causing them to pop loose from the ice. It was like a glacier was a bowling lane, and we were the pins. One of the porters and his yak got hit by a large rock and had to return to base camp. "Did you get the strike on tape?" Jack asked. No. He swore. I spent most of the trip with Holly, who wasn't doing well. I think because she was carrying her own pack. I offered to lug it up for a while, but she insisted on carrying it herself, for which I was relieved. Anything was better than sleeping under the wall. The next morning the cold was back, which was good because it lessened the chances of avalanches. On the way to camp, too, we heard over the radio that there were 3 climbing parties moving up to Camp 5. They were going to make a summit attempt the following day. Gulu was concerned because they had taken only 1 load of oxygen tanks to Camp 5. Zopa radioed to Josh. "I heard," Josh said. "Idiots. None of them are fully acclimated. This is their only second time above Camp 4. As far as the tanks go, some of them are going to try to get to the top without supplemental O's, so there should be enough for those who need it." "If the weather holds," Zopa said. "I talked to them about that, but their concern is that there won't be another good weather window. Nothing we can do about it. They get to Camp 5, they're on their own." What he meant by this is that above Camp 5 there is little chance for rescue. The air is too thin for a helicopter, and at that altitude anyone is too out of it to help anyone but themselves. If you die above Camp 5, your corpse stays there forever. "Oh," Josh said, "one more thing. Captain Sheck has been asking around about a Sherpa. He says he thinks he came up on the truck with you." "Sanjo," Zopa said. "He left a few days ago, back at to school. He just came up for the ride." "I'll pass that on to the captain." This part of the conversation was obviously completely planned for Captain Sheck's benefit. The only problem now was that if the captain caught sight of Sanjo again, Zopa was going to be in trouble too. "Everything else okay?" Josh asked. "Yes, we are all fine. I'll check in later." Zopa signed off and JR pointed the video camera at Zopa. "Do you think those climbers will make it to the summit?" "Perhaps," Zopa said, "but it is too early in the season. If they make it, the others will try, and some of them will die. There are no shortcuts to the top of Sagamanta." By the time that we reached ABC the following afternoon, we were all exhausted, especially Sanjo, who was still feeling the effects of his recent illness. In a role reversal from our last time at ABC, I made dinner for us while he lay in a sleeping bag. I like to say that I felt sorry for him, but the truth is that I didn't. I was still resentful about his horning in my climb. After we ate, I went outside and found the porters and the Sherpas sorting through the gear that they were going to haul up to Camp 5. Zopa explained that the yaks could not go much past ABC. The Sherpas would carry the gear on their backs to Camps 4 and 5 and 6 and establish camps a few days before we made our summit attempt. In the meantime, a couple of them would stay at ABC to guard the other stuff. "People will steal it?" I said. "It has happened," Zopa said. "Not all the expeditions are as well equipped or funded as your father's. Some climbers come to the mountain with nothing more than what they can carry, and sometimes they borrow equipment that they find along the way." The next morning he had us lighten our packs, carrying only what we needed for the night at Camp 4, which was a good thing because 3 hours above ABC we reached the foot of the col, which was basically a pass between 2 peaks. It was clear why Col was a dead end for the yaks. The wall leading up to the pass was enormous, and from the base it looked terrifyingly unstable. Half of the wall was smooth, rounded off by strong winds, giving it the look of soft ice cream. The other half was made out of nasty seracs, or ice towers, that looked like giant, jagged teeth. If I had enough breath, the sight would have taken it away. I looked at my altimeter watch, 7,000 meters, or 22,965 feet. Holly slogged up and rested her hands and knees before looking up at the terrible wall. "No way," she said. I agreed. Yogi and Yash walked up next, frowning and shaking their heads. Zopa and Sanjo arrived last. Zopa was carrying Sanjo's pack. Sanjo looked really bad. When he saw the wall, his face filled with dread. I almost felt sorry for him. "Imagine what it was like 2 days ago, when it was thawing," Zopa said. It was a good point. 3 teams made it up to the col in worse conditions than this. The first stage was the hardest. It was up a steep pitch of soft ice. Sherpas had cut the steps into the ice, and there were fixed ropes, but the ice was thick, and the ropes were still coated with ice because we were the first up that day. We fell into an agonizing rhythm. Slide the Jumar up the rope. A Jumar is a mechanical ascender with a handle that slides up the rope and grabs on so that you have something to hold on to as you pull yourself up. Step, breathe, Jumar, step. 3 hours later, it was more like Jumar, think, look up, think again, step, rest, 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 hug the wall, pray. As a chunk of the ice the size of a Hummer fell past, crushing below, followed by the sound of our leaders, Yogi and Yash, laughing. Real funny. They were breaking away the loose ice along the route, so it wouldn't unexpectedly peel us off the wall or knock our heads out of our butts, helmet and all. I was next in line, followed by the film crew, Holly, Sunjo, and Zopa. The climb was anything but quiet, with the brothers shouting, "Ice!" and Zopa shouting, "Faster!" 4 hours after we started, I reached the steepest pitch, 50 feet. It might as well have been 50 miles. My arms and legs were numb and virtually useless, but the worst part was the air. There wasn't any, or it seemed. Each breath seemed to yield only a thimbleful of precious oxygen, maybe enough to keep a bird alive, but not enough for an exhausted 14-year-old climber. Dr. Wu had been wrong. There was something the matter with me. Yogi and Yash were already on top. One of them was manning the ropes, and I hoped the other one was boiling snow at Camp 4. We'd all need a steaming cup of tea when we got there, if we got there. Holly, Sunjo, and Zopa had dropped farther behind, and I could still hear Zopa shouting at them to move faster. I was already ready to give up and head back down and go home when JR came up behind me. He looked terrible. His beard and goggles were covered with ice. It was all a wonder that he could see where he was going. "Thanks for waiting," he rasped. "I need to film you arriving. Give me a couple minutes. Head start to set the shot." I didn't have enough breath to tell him that I hadn't been waiting. I looked at my watch, and by the time that I figured out what time it was, JR was already several feet above me. Without actually thinking about it, I started up behind him. An hour later, when I finally reached the top, Yogi hauled me up over the edge by my backpack, which I was sure was not the shot that JR wanted. Yogi's assist reminded me that 7 weeks ago, to the day, a cop had done the same thing to me on the top of the Woolworth building. I had come a long way, and it had felt like it. I spent a good 10 minutes on my knees trying to catch my breath until it dawned on me, again, that at this altitude, there was no breath to catch. With difficulty, I got to my feet and stumbled over to where Yash was trying to boil water. Camp 4 was tiny, and to make it worse, there was a gaping crevasse running beneath the crest, which I read was getting wider every year. Some believed that one of these days, hopefully not today, the whole thing would collapse and the climbers would have to devise a new route up the north side. I looked toward the summit, which was shrouded in gray mist, but I could see enough to pick out the route along the north ridge and across the north face to the pyramid. It seemed like a very long way from there. Yash and I were squatting. I couldn't imagine the 3 climbing parties trying for the top feeling like I did. My ribs ached from trying to get enough O's into my lungs to survive. I knew that Zopa was carrying at least 2 tanks in case of an emergency, and I suspected that Yogi and Yash had a couple stashed as well. Sherpas do not climb without loads. For them, that would be a waste of effort. I thought about begging Yash for a hit off the tank, but resisted the urge, knowing it would defeat the purpose of the climb. Instead, I started to put together my tent, which seemed a lot more complicated than it had at the ABC the day before. Jack and Will came over the top next. Will spent a good 10 minutes on his hands and knees puking. GR did not film this. 45 minutes later, I was still working on the tent when Yogi hauled Holly over the edge, followed by Sunjo and Zopa. Zopa was shaking his head in disgust, muttering, "Too slow, too slow, too slow." He bent down to the 2 slowpokes. "If you climb like that above here, you can forget the summit." Holly and Sunjo were out of it, and didn't appear to have the slightest idea of what he was saying. I thought he was being pretty harsh considering Holly's lack of conditioning and Sunjo's recent sickness. He came over to where I was struggling with the tent, and I thought, here it comes, but instead he patted me on the back. You did good, he said. You have a chance. And that was like a whole tank of O's flowing into my bloodstream. Maybe he wasn't going to try to stop me from getting to the summit. Suddenly the tent made complete sense. I had it together in less than 5 minutes, and I got everything unpacked, the pads, the sleeping bags spread out, and I started in on Holly's tent as she and Sunjo watched through the dull, lifeless eyes. The burst of energy cost me. As soon as I finished, it was all I could do to get to my feet. Zopa brought over 3 mugs of tea and made us drink them down. Get your stuffs going, he said. I know you are not hungry, but you have to eat and drink. He looked up at the sky. It's going to snow tonight.